Have you achieved success and a high income, but still lack personal fulfillment and work-life balance? You're in the right place. Welcome to the Successful But Struggling podcast. Join us as Erin, Eunicia, Joanne, and Mim share transformative insights and practical strategies just for you. Discover real stories and lessons that will elevate your personal satisfaction, professional accomplishment, and financial empowerment.
Do you ever feel like your strengths can go against you? We will be talking about how that happens, especially for women in medicine, and we'll be talking about even unintended consequences, how it shows up, how can you identify it, and what can we do about it. And I am with one of my favorite people in the whole wide world, my co-host, Dr. Erin Hurley, and I'm going to go straight to it. Explain that question to us, Erin, if the listener is like, what did she just say? Strengths go against me? How could that happen? Explain that to us.
Well, I've been thinking about this a lot, and I had a conversation with my sister about this recently, that sometimes we are so good at doing things. Maybe we're really good at problem solving that everyone relies on us to solve the problem. Or maybe we're the best at not just one thing, but many things. And so everyone looks to us to be that person. And as we've talked about in prior episodes about delegation, and sometimes you try to pass that thing to another person, and they're like, oh, no, you know how to do this. You're so good at this. You keep it. And sometimes I've had these conversations in my marriage about, no, honey, this is a hard pass. I'm handing you this task. I need you to take it and run with it. Even if it takes you 3 times or 10 times longer than me, this is yours. I'm asking you to keep it. Don't bounce it back to me. And then I have to ask myself, Erin, what is it that you're doing that's making it really hard to step away from some of those tasks that you no longer want to do, or that makes it hard for my family members to not rely on me to do something? And that curiosity that we talk about, I wonder, what is it that I might be doing to create these circumstances that I am not appreciating? Joanne, do you ever find yourself in those situations?
Never. What are you talking about? Oh my goodness. I have so many things going through my mind right now because it's different filters in terms of how when we're good at something, we feel almost like a sense of responsibility. And then there's also let me not bother people. I don't want to ask for anything. And, the other thing that came to mind as I'm coaching physicians is I'll usually ask them, like, what are some words that you identify with that define kind of the great qualities that you are? And so many of them say, serving, loving, caring, hardworking, always available, there to solve problems. And I question them, is that how you want to keep on showing up, especially if they're coming to me stressed, overwhelmed, burned out, and reframing I want to be there for everyone. That's kind of one that stands out for me because that's right, like a beautiful thing that can go against us if we're trying to set boundaries and protect our time and energy. And I've definitely been there of, kind of and it feels good because we're like, no, I'm there for everyone else. And what's the cost? And that's kind of self-sacrificing attitude there.
I love that. What's the cost? Because we oftentimes are not taught to think like that. In business, they always talk about what's the return on your investment. If I say yes to this opportunity, what is it going to cost me? And is the return on that investment worthwhile? In medicine, it's kind of the opposite. I look at it as we're handed this enormous pile of things to do, like a big turkey-sized platter of things to do that's meant to serve 18 or 20 people, and it's just for you to get it done. If we think about, our training in medical school and in residency, and there aren't these things of like, what is the cost? What's the cost to my health, to my sleep, to my well-being if I make it through and do all of these things? So we aren't taught to really look at that as a factor in, am I going to say yes to this plea for help? Am I going to say yes to me being the one to solve this problem?
Go ahead. Sorry.
Oh, I was going to say the other piece that I'm thinking about that I wrote down here is the fear of letting others make mistakes. But I want to hear what that thought is of yours as we wrap up this last piece.
I was going to ask you of a term that I've heard you talk about that I identify with related to the question, and it's that term of over-functioning. And I think a lot of women physicians can relate.
And that's interesting you say that over-functioning, because it makes me think of our last episode. And if you didn't listen to that one on imposter syndrome, and we didn't use the term over-functioning, but we used the term hardworking and overcompensating. And when we are over-functioning, maybe because we're so smart or we're so fast at getting things done or so good at problem solving, when we are functioning maybe at a different level or even a different speed, if we're a fast processor and we're not patient, somebody else might be able to do a beautiful job and we aren't patient enough to allow them the time and capacity to do that. And can we get out of that over-functioning overdrive and step back and say, you know what? I don't have to be the one. I don't need to get the accolades, the credit for getting this done. I'm going to step back and I'm going to allow my coworker, my spouse, my child to step in and do this instead, even when you're the best, not just good at it, not just great at it. What if you are the best and it still isn't serving people for you to be the one to do that task? And can we ask ourselves that question more often and maybe encourage ourselves to stop over-functioning?
That's so good. What comes to mind is I usually, when I'm coaching, I'll say we have to ask better questions. And we tend to ask ourselves, can I do that? Can I do that well? And the answer, it's almost always going to say yes, but that's not always the right answer. And this is what I'm hearing you say. It's a kind of a different way of what I'm going to say. The question is, do I need to? Should I? What's the cost? I love how you said it so clearly, because it's the question is not, can I do this? Or am I the best one? Is this the right thing for me right now? That's oh my goodness, we need that tattooed in our
that right now, because we talked about this before. I said yes to so many commitments when my kids were young. I said yes to a big leadership position, to creating a new clinic, to volunteering, all of these things. And I look back and I thought, that really wasn't your season to say yes to all of those things, even though you did a great job. How much better could I have been had I waited maybe a little longer when the kids were a little older, when I didn't have so many things on my plate? How could I have showed up even better had I had some different perspective on, I don't have to say yes to everything right now. There will be other opportunities in the future. So I do want to go back to that fear of letting other people make mistakes. And as we talk about women physicians and people in medicine and that idea of perfectionism, because sometimes a mistake can be life or death. We don't like to talk about mistakes in medicine. And yet, when we let that carry over to too many areas of our lives, like how do your family members load the dishwasher? How do they take out the trash? And if it isn't the same as you, or at the same time as you, or maybe it's getting an application in for something, or they are not doing it to your standards, can we sometimes step back and allow others to make those painful mistakes? Not fix it for them, because sometimes we're getting in the way of their own growth and becoming, for example, if I fix everything for my kids as they become young adults, they're not going to learn how to do it themselves. And as painful that is as a mom and a pediatrician to step back and see my own kids sometimes even fail, not just make mistakes, but fail at something. And yet we both know there are lessons in those failures. And that's where that growth comes to play.
Yes, a few things come to mind. I was thinking about it at work. As a leader, where it's so easy, or not necessarily easy, but we tend to have a lot of ideas, and we kind of know how, especially if you've done it for a while, you kind of know how things work. And I've learned one of my biggest lessons as a leader was stepping back, actually, and then letting the team come up with ideas and acknowledge them, and then assigning them to them. And we know if in a team, if you feel like you're involved and you have a sense of ownership, you'll show up better. Right? That simple psychology. And it's beautiful to see it, and then see them working at it with enthusiasm, and instead of, what kind of energy they might have if you just tell them what to do, and even if they don't agree. And I see that in my department in a beautiful way. I love it. And plus we learn, and it's also, I'm very extroverted. So I'm want to raise my hand and speak, and I don't have a problem there. But I have to say, I don't like to generalize, but psychiatry is kind of a field where it attracts more introverts. So I kind of stand out. And so that was another lesson of, dude, talking to myself, you need to so be quiet. And then the asking people specifically, what do you think? What are some of your ideas? Because they might not volunteer. And frequently, my introverts have the best ideas. So that's such a neat thing. And then I was thinking, as I heard you talk, this is a little bit tangent, but as my 16-year-old just got his driver's license, and then it's like, Mom, you have to let him go. It's okay for him to drive by himself. So he's used the car by himself a few times. I'm going to pat myself in the back that I survived. Thank goodness nothing happened. But that's what I have to say to myself. And of course, this is a full tangent, but it's still kind of the similar lesson of, we can't protect everyone all the time. We cannot do for everyone all the time. And we have to learn to step back and give the platform to someone else and see it like that. Like, let me see them learn and shine, and what we get from that as well.
And I loved how you pointed out that sometimes when we look through the filter of knowing yourself the best, hopefully we know ourselves well. And when you can recognize, I'm this way, let me make sure that I'm watching out for those people who are different than me. As you said, the introverts, or I'm a super fast processor, the people who need some time and consideration and may not come up with an answer. And can we patiently wait and make the circumstances not, again, our strengths in that area can work against us if we're not acknowledging the other people that work differently than we do. They're going to be totally ignored or feel ignored. And can we instead recognize, oh, how can we open up the space so everyone can have a voice?
And you might be thinking, how can strengths be a bad thing? And how can me doing something good be a bad thing? And I want you to talk about that, Erin, of what are some of the consequences? Kind of, you've talked about some examples, but especially unintended ones.
And it's hard to think about unintended consequences when we think about our strengths. And yet, as you were saying, or as we were talking about, when you put a bunch of strengths together, or maybe those strengths are good in one setting and not so good in another. And I'm going to bring up the idea of us in medicine. A lot of times we have to be very emotionally well controlled. There may be an emergency going on. We have to have our wits, our thinking brain about us. So we have learned a lot of ways to manage our emotions so that when those emergencies do come up, we can stay in our right mind, be thinking clearly so we can do great patient care. Think about an emergency room physician, or even a patient who, something surprising happens. We need to be able to manage that and not be thrown completely off. And that's not normal for many people in their jobs. And yet, if we take that emotional sometimes I call myself like an ice queen, because in a really difficult time, maybe it's with my family, my brain is automatically going to the problem solving when everybody else is emotionally processing. And that strength of me keeping my emotions together at work might be amazing, but it may not be appreciated when my family is dealing with emotionally difficult things, or they're sharing with me something emotionally difficult. And I don't even look like I'm reacting because I'm bringing in my strengths from work into a different situation where it doesn't have a great match.
I'm feeling your words all over because this is something that comes up so frequently. It's almost a parallel to when we talk about perfectionism, and of course we rewarded it as precision. There's times when our work as a doctor needs to be very precise. And in the parallel here, there are times that we do want to kind of shut our emotions down so that we can show up in case of an emergency, right? And we can think of if you're coming in with a trauma, you want your surgeon to be cool. You don't want them freaking out. Or for example, if, like I've heard you, Erin, talk so much about those very difficult traumatic histories that you hear from kids. And, I have similar stories in my office as a psychiatrist. I can't just be totally emotional with my patients. So we learn to process them differently, and I always said like, oh no, I would hear other doctors talk about that and I could see it getting in their way. And I would kind of say like, oh, I don't have that problem because I am a psychiatrist. I am all about emotions. And then on top of that, I'm Puerto Rican. I have all the feelings. And I was, I proved myself wrong that I am good at identifying them. I am good at feeling it for other people. But I had to go through some difficult times to recognize how my brain shuts down emotions so quickly. And just because I can, like I say that sometimes I'm like a dialysis machine of emotions because I can hear it, kind of process them and give them back, but I have to shut down mine. And I've shared here when my dad died that I went on super doctor mode and my brother went into military mode to take care of business, literally make very difficult life and death decisions for my dad. And then we took care of my mom. And my friends were like, are you okay? I'm like, I'm totally fine. Like, I'm sad because my dad died, but I'm fine. And they were like, you're not we're worried. What's wrong with you? I'm like, I'm fine. And it took me weeks to realize there's something wrong with my grief. And I would want to cry at random times. And I would be like, okay, good. I'm going to cry now. And then the tears would stop. And then I would want to cry like right before going to work. And I recognized exactly this point. I am not processing my emotions well. And my brain is knocking them down. I need to do something about it. I need different kind of help to go through my grief. That was a long example there, but think about it.
Used to feeling the ability to cry. There have been so many calls that I've been on with coaching clients or people who were trying to learn more about coaching. And the questions that I asked, I'm sure similar to yours, would oftentimes trigger deep kind of digging in and tears would flow. And they were so apologetic. And I'm like, actually, it's okay to cry. Mm-hmm. We are so used to holding it all together. And this is a safe space. You can cry here. It may not be appropriate in front of your patients and things, but creating those safe spaces so we can fully process our emotions when we're so used to holding it together so well when we're at work. And then recognizing what are the different places I'm at when I need to rely on those strengths. And at what point can I let go of those? And as you said, sometimes let somebody else step in or say, no, it is appropriate to be more emotional in the circumstances.
And Erin, you reviewed some of this already, but what are some things that we can do? I always say that resiliency can go against us. I know that resiliency is a bad word for women, for some women physicians. And we sometimes lose ourselves in the process when we're doing so much. What would be some best practices for us to reconnect with our emotions and to make sure that our strengths stay as strengths and that they don't go against us?
One of the biggest areas that I get so passionate about is when women in medicine are struggling so much and they just want to fix it themselves and they isolate and they withdraw. And again, not, coaching, counseling, finding a mentor, any of those things is okay. Talking to a friend, a sibling, a relative, journaling, but really trying to find somebody to process things with. And let's stop trying to fix it all ourselves, because by reaching out to somebody else, they may be able to help you get to a better solution so much more easily and take that weight off. Because we oftentimes don't recognize kind of that emotional burden that we're carrying by trying to fix everything for everyone at all times. And so that's one is, I've talked about this before, let's lower that bar to whether it's asking for help or just even having a person to bounce ideas off of or to let some relief of emotions and tensions go. And then another one is getting curious. Asking yourself, I wonder, what would happen if I stepped back and allowed another person to step into this role that I'm taking and allow them to do it without micromanaging or putting our own perfectionism on that? And then also just looking to see where are those areas that I can allow others to stumble, make mistakes, maybe fall down, and pause long enough to let them figure it out without stepping in to remedy the situation.
As women physicians, so many of us are great at doing so many things, but what I heard you say is that just because you can doesn't mean that you have to. It doesn't mean that it's the best thing, right? Like that return on your investment and what's the cost of saying yes to all the things, and that term over functioning, like I felt it like a little punch in my gut, and that it's okay to have all the emotions and to feel, because that's kind of how we're programmed, that we're supposed to do everything, and making sure that we let other people, we let go of the perfectionism, we delegate, and that we ask for help, obviously. And I love what you said of allowing the emotions and creating the space for that. I think that was a beautiful message. I want to make sure that you listen to this clearly, because that's something that I know that you and I both help women physicians with, this beautiful, just creating that space and allowing for all the emotions. And again, stop trying to do it all yourself. And we give this message a lot. Do not isolate. Please reach out. And I had a coach said what you said. Do you want to feel better? Lower the expectations. I was like, what? You don't say that to a doctor. And then I was like, man, that's so right on. So thank you for bringing that up, and love the bring more awareness and get curious. Erin, give me one more pearl that we can cherish and take with us.
When you step into these new ways of looking at your strengths and trying not to make them turn into a weakness, is just letting go of either guilt from allowing someone else to go into the space or to take over that role, letting go of those emotions that aren't going to serve you, that might be your automatic go-to. Oh, I feel guilty that now somebody else is doing this, or I feel guilty that my child made this mistake. Can we let go of that guilt because it doesn't really serve anybody, and just get comfortable with inviting new emotions in, that curiosity or that wonder about, oh, I wonder how this is going to turn out now that we're trying something new.
Thank you, Erin. This has been beautiful. And remember, if you're liking this podcast, please rate and review. That's how we reach other people. We've loved the comments so far, so keep them coming, and stay tuned for our next episode.
Don't miss out on more strategies that will elevate you to new heights. Visit successfulbutstruggling.com now, where you'll discover exclusive resources and the opportunity to connect with each of us individually. There you can dive deeper into how you, too, can take your personal and professional game to the next level. And if you're serious about optimizing your results, take 2 quick steps now. Number 1, connect with us on the website. And number 2, tune in to the next episode.
I don't have to be the one. I don't need to get the accolades, the credit for getting this done. I'm going to step back and I'm going to allow my coworker, my spouse, my child to step in